Welcome to Dive into World Building. I'm Juliet Wade, and I'm tired today, but we're good. There were some technical difficulties in opening up the Hangout, which means that it's just me and Che so far. But if you're on the invitation list, you can come in anytime. So just keep that in mind. So if you happen to run across this on your Google, trust me, you're welcome to come and join us. Anyway, we're talking about hair. I don't know. Hair is fun. So I noticed that Che and I both have short hair.
Mm-hmm.
I've had short hair for a very long time, quite a number of years. And here's Morgan. Yay! Sorry, Morgan. All the mix-ups. Morgan has longer hair, right? Morgan, you put your hair back?
I do. I have longer hair. Yeah, I just got here, so
No problem. I'm just remarking. These are my opening sort of random casual remarks.
yeah, it's shorter than it used to be up until a few years ago. But it is usually below my shoulders when I wear it down.
So I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of different things in the next 45 minutes, but what I do want to start by remarking is that part of what hair is it's partly a personal style, but it's also a part of it's also how personal style is not just personal style. Personal style is how you represent yourself to the world, right? And as such, it has certain kinds of consequences. And you don't typically see this that much in your day-to-day life necessarily. I mean, some people have a lot of people commenting on their appearance or whatever, but when you're a celebrity, for example, people feel that they can legitimately comment on your appearance, and short versus long hair is one of the things that has been actually very contentious. Specifically, I mean, so let's say short versus long hair for women, which is the first thing. Felicia Day got an enormous amount of internet hate when she cut her hair. Not sure if you guys were aware of that.
No.
Yeah, she got mobbed. I think I get the sense that it's mostly out in the MRA territories, but there are groups of men out there who think that short hair is a sign of just lack of femininity, and it's ugly, and it means you're awful and unworthy of love, and like all this stuff. Like, I mean, so
it's a rejection of men.
Yeah, so maybe I think maybe they think it implies. I'm gonna write some think it implies rejection of men.
Yes. That I'm sorry. That was some people think it is meant as a rejection of men.
Right.
Some people,
and there is butch style, which is deliberately short and masculine hairstyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like my hair is short, but it's not masculine. It's not necessarily feminine either. I mean, there are guys who have this hairstyle roughly, right? Usually not with the color, but sometimes, so there's definitely a lot of gender presentation that goes into hairstyle. I'm going to just reference my son without actually inviting him out here because he's sick today. But my son has long hair, and he gets misgendered a lot. So for men, short versus long hair is a different kind of thing, right? I mean,
Not really.
military haircut.
I've had short hair and been misgendered too, like since high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian.
It is. It kind of pisses you off. It really does.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that in a second, Brian. So for men, you have like military haircuts, and you had like, I mean, imagine you had, for example, the Beatles when they started growing their hair out. It was like this huge deal, right? The Beatles haircut. Oh my gosh, watch out. You know, Beatles haircut or lack thereof. But like even hair that was like longer than a bowl cut was just scandalous at one point, right?
It's come and gone through history. You
Right,
couldn't
exactly.
be a rakehead in the
Yeah.
17th century without long hair and a ponytail.
Well, I mean, let's face it. If we get into history, things are more complicated, and I totally want to go there. But I do want to mention lack of hair.
Why?
because it's relevant.
Is it a thing?
I have a story about that one too.
Lack of hair. There's a lot to talk about. You know, there's a whole industry in making men feel bad for being bald. Right? I mean, the industry of you're not masculine enough because you have no hair. Don't you want to pay us lots of money so that you can have some? You know, it's pretty strong.
The pressure is constant.
And
to dye it, I mean, just going grey. I mean, my beard's been grey for 10, 15 years.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I haven't aged in that time because I'd pre-aged.
Yeah,
started
I'm only 12.
early
You know
for
that,
sure.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend who had a tuft of gray hair in the front of his head, and he was 16 years old.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then, of course, there's also going bald early. You know.
Yeah, I was doomed. My father was bald when I was 21. He was 21.
Well, okay, so this is interesting because there is a lot of male pattern baldness out there, but my understanding of it was that it was a sex-linked trait, which would mean that it's carried on an X chromosome. And so it would mean that it would be impossible to inherit your hair pattern from your father.
I think it's also, but there's two different kinds. There's like the baldness that starts at the top of the head and then thins out. And then there's the one where like it just recedes from the hairline on back until you're done.
So there may be different types, and they may be genetically differently determined. So we don't have to get into the genetics of sex linking.
Yeah, somebody can Google it out there if you're curious.
Go
I'm
out
sure
and
you can
Google
find
it,
out.
'cause it's actually very interesting. Well, Patrick Stewart tells a very moving story. Honestly, I've hardly ever heard him tell a story that was not moving, but he tells a very moving story about accepting his baldness. And in fact, I think they were considering having him wear hair as the captain of the Enterprise.
Ooh, that would have been weird.
And then they were like, no. And it was so much better because they just let him be who he was. But I remember him telling the story about how he lost his hair like when he was 17, which is, you know, well, I mean, head shape. Yeah, that's also part of it. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. So it's a complicated issue. There's just, I mean, the thing is when you get into hair, there's so much. So here's a different twist on baldness, and we're going to get history in here a little bit. And yeah, I feel like I've got this much of a view on a topic that's like that big. But anyway, so we'll try to get there. But so if you ever go to Colonial Williamsburg, they have, it's a wonderful place. and it's fascinating. It's like a gigantic role play. And they have all of the original stores up and running with people actually doing the original crafts. And one of the shops is the wig making shop. And if you walk into the wig making shop with your children, it's always fascinating because they will talk to you as though you are in the time period. And they will say to the boys, well, you're 7 years old. You're about ready to shave off all your hair and get a wig. You know, and then the girls would do it too, but it wasn't up to them. It was up to their dad.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, wow, it's fascinating, right? And so you have these styles where long hair was definitely a thing for both people, both genders, or all genders. It's filtered through too, I guess you'd say. You know, long hair was a thing back in colonial days. But what I would say is that some people were literally shaving their heads and wearing wigs every day.
I think I would almost venture, I wonder if that was like hygiene, because like the wigs wouldn't get lice, maybe.
Well,
you know?
I'm guessing.
So you could shave your head and have it.
I'm guessing they would get bugs, though.
I know, right? Yeah. So it's like, but you could have like this extravagant head of hair, but you could take it off and you wouldn't have like lice. I don't know.
Well, yeah. Or mice.
Right. Yeah. Of course, yeah, I know. Yeah, right. If mice start living your wig.
You can have, little things nesting in your hair.
Yeah.
The wig thing is weird because I haven't I need to go and research how the wig thing started. It was late 17th century, post Restoration in the UK. Wigs suddenly became super fashionable, and everyone had to wear one. Now in England, if you're up before the judge wears a wig.
Yeah.
Even now in the 20th century, I don't think this happens in the US, but that exact same style of wig is still worn because our judicial system started to concentrate around this whole judges and magistrates courts at exactly the time when wigs were fashionable. So everyone went, oh, that's what a judge wears. And it became this traditional costume. When everybody else stopped wearing wigs, the judges carried on doing it for another 200 years and still do today. It's very, very weird.
Do the barristers also?
In certain courts, yes. I think in Crown Court it's still a thing. I suspect less so than it was. I've never been to court because I'm innocent, honest.
Well, I've still seen it in like British TV shows, like current ones, where they get the little wig out and they just put it over their hair and wear it to court.
I'm going to have to tell you a terrible thing now, Che. Not everything you see,
TV.
even on British TV, not everything you see.
You're supposed to be reliable.
I have destroyed your last illusion, haven't I?
Yeah.
But I mean, it seems like it would just be like one weird extra prop. Like, why would you bother with it if it wasn't still kind of contemporary?
Well, so
I think it's a Crown Court. I suspect it's a class thing as well. There's bound to be class. If it's a British tradition, class is bound to be involved somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it's involved here too. We just like to deny it.
Yeah.
So okay. I don't want to go too far into wigs, but I mean, we have fashionable wigs. Wigs are worn for fashion right now. They're also worn for people who are undergoing cancer treatment. Not everybody wears a wig if they're going through chemotherapy, right? But some people do. But I think that wearing wigs for fashion is more of an actor thing, and maybe more prevalent in African American communities as well. There are a lot of, it's hard to speak monolithically. I mean, okay, you can speak monolithically, but you can't do it accurately. About culture, as even American culture has lots and lots of, different subgroups. So I do want to make a note about the idea of wigs for chemotherapy, though, because there are a lot of narratives out there about women who lost their hair and went around wearing wigs for a while, and then decided, you know what, I'm just going to let it go, and I'm going to own my head, and this is what we're going to do, and they feel very empowered by that. And it's really interesting, because I think that in some ways it's similar to the stories I've heard from men who were trying to hide the fact that they were losing their hair and then wanted to accept themselves. And so there is a sort of an interesting kind of acceptance narrative that takes different forms for different people, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more acceptable to be a bald man than a bald woman, though.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of stigma surrounding that. And I mean, I think it's partly because it's less common, and partly because it's more common in men. It's sort of assumed to be a male thing, right? And
it's
so
certainly a lot of women in later life, post-menopause, do start to lose hair. A lot of wig making, certainly in the UK, is related to older women wearing wigs to cover up their baldness or thinning hair, because that's not an acceptable thing. Whereas men do have the choice; they can go bald, and people won't, like look at them strangely at a bus stop, which a bald woman will be.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean the wig industry in the UK, certainly in my experience, was heavily directed towards women, and it was very much women 50 plus, 60 plus.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, it's all also all tied in with this idea that women have to be ready to be looked at, that women have to be ready for male gaze all the time, right? I'm looking at Morgan's talk about the crowning glory, and yours too, Che. So yeah, I mean, it's highly. This goes back to our discussion of head coverings, right? 2 weeks ago. Because honestly, it does have a lot of significance, especially for women. And the question becomes, oh, should I cover it up? Do you remember, Brian might remember, do you remember the bald woman? And I think she was in like Star Trek 1.
Persis
Kambata, mentioned upstream by Morgan, I think. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, I missed it, Morgan.
It's okay.
I am trying to. Persis Kambata. Okay, there we go. That was. Do you remember that? Do you remember how huge that was when it happened? Everybody was like, "Look at her! She's totally bald." I don't know what it was about that. I mean, partly it was the science fiction. I mean, the fact that it was used for science fiction was meant to make a statement, I guess. But
was her character supposed to be an alien?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she was. That was like, I think like their whole race was bald or something. I think they managed to like squeeze in some kind of information about that. I have not seen that. That's not my favorite Trek movie.
Yeah, well, it's long and
it's no one's favorite Trek movie.
So there's I guess you could say there's a surprising amount at stake with hair. And so there's there's personal identity, there's virility,
I'm going to say we haven't touched on rank and social
class.
standing.
We've mentioned social class briefly in the discussion of wigs, but yeah, I completely agree.
Well, I'm thinking of like geisha have very specific hair.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, and that's something like modern that's still current we can look at, but I mean all throughout history. But like geisha have very specific hairdos and very specific hair throughout their careers.
And actually, I would remark too that this is very similar to what Brian was mentioning about how judges started wearing wigs when everybody started wearing wigs, and they just never stopped. The geisha hairstyles are traditional hairstyles, and they've been around for hundreds of years. So one of the reasons why they stand out so strikingly now is because they are throwbacks in a sort of a similar way.
Yeah, from another time almost.
Yeah, I mean certainly. Well, let's see, geisha culture. Geisha culture. I guess it was really big in the 1800s in Japan, in the Edo period. But I mean, yeah, because the elaborate hairstyles with like the wings and the whole all this binding stuff that happened later. If you think back to the Heian period, this was when that was a period when women of high class would just let their hair grow and grow and grow, but they would wear it down. They wouldn't wear it up. You know, you couldn't go anywhere because it was longer than you were, right? And
that's and obviously peasant women.
And you had to be careful when you washed it, right? Right. So they'd wash it like once a month, but you couldn't wash it on an inauspicious day.
Well, I've heard of sometime in the past few decades, and I don't remember who, but young, I want to say Chinese women, but I'm going to go with Asian because I don't remember specifically, who were punished for leaving the house or having a boyfriend by having their hair cut, having their parents cut their hair. It was very shameful.
Oh dear. Well, and also there also is the
cultures that I know of.
And there's in Sikhism, you don't cut your hair.
Yeah.
So to cut it would be kind of awful.
Native Americans didn't cut their hair either, and I just obviously it's still will still. I mean, not everybody, but some still wear it long and don't cut it.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that varies a lot across cultures.
Or like the monk tonsures.
Yes.
Where it would be like your monastic order, and you just have that weird little shaved circle. And same goes like the samurai it would be like that, and then you'd have like the top knot, but it would be shaved at the top.
And actually, that's retained in the sumo wrestlers.
So there has been a lot of like sort of cultural like group belonging indicated by specific hairstyles. Okay, so
at this point I need to talk a little bit about African American hairstyles. Okay. Or let's just say, okay, so African hair in general. It's a huge topic. Go read Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, because actually the hair of the protagonist is a really, really important element of the story. She comes from a culture in Namibia that coats their hair with clay and leaves the end in big poofs. And I'm not remembering the name of it because I'm blanking because I'm tired.
It's okay.
But go read this story because it's really cool and really important. And one of the issues is that people make Himba, there we go, lots of comments about her hair in the story. There is a huge problem with people making inappropriate comments about African American people's hair. The possibilities when you have that particular texture of hair are incredibly diverse. If you've ever seen the film Kirikou la sorcière is the name of it. I'll write it here. Kirikou and Kirikou and the Sorceress. If you haven't seen it, you should totally see it. It's a delight. It's a delight, this movie. But one of the things that you see is that everybody has the diversity of the hairstyles in just even in this one location in the film is really quite delightful, right? There are all these possibilities. Poofs of various types, you know, shaving the head, all these different options that you wouldn't necessarily think of if you hadn't been exposed to that culture, right? It's also an interesting topic because people get punished for having African American hairstyles in the U.S. in certain places at certain times. And people people behave very inappropriately towards African American hair, let's just say. And it's related to racism and all of that in our country. But so what you'll have is you'll have things like this recent lawsuit that said, well, it was okay for a company to fire somebody for having dreadlocks. I am hoping that goes up on appeal because that's ridiculous.
It needs to, and it can go. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know a lot about law. I know something about language. Hair and hairstyle are different, and what the decision was apparently had to do with hair not being an immutable thing. But it is. You can't change hair. You can change a hairstyle. But insisting that people do that is akin to insisting that if a woman wants to work at your company, she must dye her hair blonde.
Yeah, right.
She must, or you won't hire her.
Fox News.
You can't change hair. You know, you just, it's a cellular structure, it's genetic, and it is as related to your race as your skin is. And so if somebody, it seems to me that if somebody attacks it on hair versus hairstyle, then they might be able to get into it and say, look,
yeah, it's possible. I'm you know,
here.
I mean, that's a discussion that obviously needs to be reopened because that's a really inappropriate thing to say to somebody. But you know, kids suspended from school for having their hair in a way that the teachers don't like, and and so coincidentally, they often happen to be cornrows or dreadlocks or whatever happens to be, right? Just coincidentally or not, right? They happen to be black hairstyles. There's also this huge pressure for black women to straighten their hair.
And the women who are fired, the people who are fired for wearing dreadlocks are not the white women who wear them.
Right. Yes.
But hairstyles that are, well, we were talking about cutting long hair, that happened to still happens, I think, to Native Americans who wear their hair long. You can't come to school if you don't cut your hair.
Yes, it's true.
And the gender thing, boys have been suspended from school for having long hair. but the texture and the skin on African American hair is a much detailed issue.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
so I
very
don't think,
complicated. It's very complex. It's
Yeah.
let's just say it was important for me to bring this up because this is one of the things that happens with hair. And so if you're writing, let's say you're writing fiction and you just sort of give everybody default hair because you're not thinking that through, you might be missing a lot of really amazing opportunities to demonstrate how societal forces in your story play out. Because what we're talking about here is like hair is the excuse, right? It's the excuse that people use to act on their racism in these cases of suspensions, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to realize that there are these small, seemingly small details of appearance or of personal grooming or whatever it happens to be. But your personal identity and your cultural identity is very, very tied up in that. And so it can become a huge point of contention and it can change your life, right? Can your hairstyle change your life? Yes, it can, right? Because if you're being suspended for your hairstyle, how are you going to, how are you going to continue your education and not be labeled as a troublemaker, et cetera, undeservedly? And then all of a sudden your path is different. So, yeah. So
it's a thing because if you look at somebody and you say, okay, they have dark skin or particular skin tone, but I'm not really sure. You can look at their facial features, but you can look at their hair and say, okay, this person is not what I want them to be. I can identify them as somebody who is, somebody I can look down on,
right,
or respect, but nature of our current society that we live in, that's not going to be that way. But it's an important thing to look at and say.
But I mean, and also I think that some people probably do think it's about the hair. They probably do think, oh, it's just about the hairstyle. It's about whether it's messy or not, or whether it's professional. But if you actually look at the instances when that occurs, you'll see that the instances of, well, I thought this person's hair was messy or whatever, happen to be falling along a pattern of racial bias. Right?
And in fact, it mostly, if you look, it's not messy. It's simply unfamiliar. And a lot of these hairstyles are meant to keep the hair under control and to keep it protected.
Right.
So that's completely the opposite of what they are.
Yeah. I happen to love the 1970s afros. Those were so cool. And I think just because I just I'm a person who likes to mess around with materials and check out their properties. And so I like the fact that African American hair can actually do that and take these shapes and like the sculpting that African American men do with their hair is really cool. I find that really interesting. And I actually love that in Steven Universe, Garnet has big hair.
Yeah.
You guys watch that show?
Yeah, it's a great show.
Took me forever, but it's a really good show.
I'm behind, but it is a great thing. So.
Oh, I'm so behind. You have no idea.
They rerun it enough. You can kind of catch it whenever. It's fine. Well,
we're watching it on a sort of here's where you catch up website. Because honestly, I didn't even see it for years. So I don't know how long it's been around, but I never started watching it until last month. But anyway,
Oh yeah, I think they're only on like season 2 or so. You're not that behind.
Well, so it's nice to see the diversification that's starting to happen in fiction and fictional depictions, right? And that means diversification of obviously hair, but you know, cultures generally. I think, yeah. So that I think is very welcome. I think defaults are a thing that we should be striving to avoid just in general. But I would say it doesn't have to take the form, you know, it doesn't have to take a really direct form. I mean, so because, for example, in Among Barbarians, the novelette that I'm working on, it's the same world as Coldwords. Basically, what's at stake is success in society and whether you're oppressed or not, and it's all tied down to what kind of fur you have.
Okay.
Right? Now, of course, the main signifier of it is not what your fur looks like, because these guys are not very appearance-oriented people. They're more, they're nose-focused.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so they should be more smell-oriented.
Yeah, they're much more smell-focused. And so that express. I mean, it's not like they don't see. But that the primariness of smell is basically meaning that even though they see things, it's not considered the most important input, right? But so their connection between having the wrong kind of fur and lower status is actually about shivering, which is the behavior that is associated with not having enough fur to be in cold regions, right? So it is about the fur, underlyingly, but again, it's obfuscated by this question of, well, it's not really about your fur; it's about how you behave, and you just happen to behave that way when you have the wrong type of fur, right? And it is tied into a history between these two groups of conquest and oppression. So, I mean. I don't mean to say, so I did this, right? But at the same time, not a lot of people focus on hair in their stories, but you can do it in various different ways. I guess that's part of my point, because I wasn't thinking about head hair when I came up with this whole scenario. And like Nnedi Okorafor did, you can tackle it head on with, you know, earth cultures and actual people's hairstyles, you know, as hairstyles. And she does some marvelous things in the story that go read it. Yes, that's Binti. Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be a sequel, so I'm looking forward to seeing that too. But okay.
So it's a thing that you can identify your groups with, and then an individual within a group saying, okay, well, this person is a member of this group, but they are wearing their hair a different length or a different color, a different style, and this is how that is changing their life, or this is why they're doing that.
Right. And you can also use things like you mentioned, where if cutting somebody's hair off would be a terrible, terrible thing. There is actually an instance in my novel when somebody cut somebody else's hair off. Yeah, and it's not, it's not fun, right? But there's all these implications. Okay, so you know, there is this particular character. She happened to give another character a piece of information, right? And then somebody who didn't want that information divulged finds out. And so the way that he punishes her is he cuts her hair off. He's the only person who would be able to cut her hair off. So the implications in terms of the point of view character are, he walks in, he sees that she's had her hair cut off, and he's able to track it. He knows exactly who did it. and why they did it, and he knows he's in trouble, even though nobody's said anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And even though it doesn't look like it looked when he first did it, she's trimmed it and whatever, so it looks like it's an acceptable hairstyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes her look a little bit like a soldier, which is a
Mm-hmm.
sort of a cross-caste look in the context of Varin, which is unusual, right? But yeah, so part of what I'm doing there is that this is stuff that's happening in the Embati caste, which is the servant caste, and they don't get to talk to each other about a lot of stuff when they're out in public situations, and nobles are around, because it's not about them, right? They got to be doing their jobs, and yet they have these ways that they communicate, or they can see a thing that will give them a message, and so main character walks into a party and realizes that this woman's had her hair cut off and is like, I'm in so much trouble, right?
Yeah.
It's a really good way to talk about things. And her hair is something that he's admired about her before. So it's also there's also that. They have a certain level of intimacy, I guess, and the hair was part of it. So it's a little bit more of a direct attack on him in a certain sense, even though the worst obviously is with her, but it definitely comes across as a threat. So, yeah, lots of opportunities there.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where, like, unless you're using it as a plot point, a lot of people sort of disparage describing hair and clothing in books sometimes, I mean, not necessarily, not all the time, but I've read a lot of things where they're like, don't describe the person, just get on with the story, and so it's one of those bits of advice floating around there where they're like, you don't need to describe your character that much.
Actually, okay.
But in fact,
there are a couple things going on there.
And in fact, because a person's appearance affects their self-perception and their place in society so strongly, it is a critical part of a character. It's a critical part of a person. It's a critical part of a character. And if you don't know that your character is, only 5 feet tall and has short hair, then you might look and say, but why is that such a big deal to you? Well, because I can't reach it, and so I'm accustomed to not being able to reach things, and so my response to they are keeping it way up there is going to be a little bit different from the response of someone who's 5'6" or 5'10".
Yeah. So I wanted to say, sorry, about Che's point a minute ago. I wanted to say, disparaging of description of hair and clothing is in part a gender thing. One of the things that I see is that whether you describe a lot in your prose has a lot to do with genre. Okay.
Yeah.
Science fiction, it depends on what you're describing, I guess. There is a lot of description, but it's not one of these things where you expect lots of description. But steampunk, they want to hear about their gadgets and their hairstyles and whatever little animated beetles are living in the person's hairstyle. On end. I mean, so I want to get to what you've just posted, Brian, but so I want to finish this thought just briefly. So romance also has a lot of description of hair and clothing. But I do think that those things are associated with femininity by a lot of people. And so that may be part of the reason why they get disparaged. It's possible. Yes, okay, we don't want to distract from the plot. That's true too. But it also has to do with what purpose the description is serving. right? Because once everybody decided that they loved the Harry Potter world, they just couldn't get enough, and the books just ballooned with all kinds of stuff, right? Because people were like, "Give me more! I don't care whether it's totally relevant," right? Like, so there is that. But I think, but you know what? There's never a good excuse not to use the tools that were given to express character and drive plot and all those kinds of things. So neglecting to notice that hair can be important would be unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to take a look at what. Okay, so we had a chat going on here at the side, which was the military, a place where certain kinds of hairstyles, like black hairstyles, have been prohibited, and it's now officially changing. Yes. Brian has also noted that Muslim and Sikh headgear are starting to be more accepted. I know that there are Sikh police officers who are wearing turbans as well. Do you want to comment on that, since you looked it up and it's a lot of reading for me? I'm trying to.
As I was thinking through that, it occurred to me, what's the situation in the Israeli Defense Force, where I'm pretty sure service is mandatory, and of course the ultra-Orthodox Jews do not trim their beard or the extensions, sideburns, hair extensions, etc., etc.
Yes, yeah.
It turns out there are all sorts of political things going on in the IDF at the moment over exactly this issue.
Oh, interesting.
There are exemptions for the ultra-Orthodox, or have been, and non-ultra-Orthodox Jews have been complaining because they are not allowed to grow beards without specific authorization, whereas the ultra-Orthodox have carte blanche to go ahead and do so. So, and because beards have become so trendy, it's not just an American hipster thing. So this is actually a big issue in the Israeli Defense Force, which just intrigued me.
Well, that is intriguing. Yeah. You know, this is one of those topics.
It goes
we need
on.
hair part 2
more, right?
Hair part 2.
Yeah.
If we ever run out, if there's a week that you don't have anything, we can do hair part 2.
Yeah,
exactly. I think what we're gonna do is call it good for today, since we're now after 11 o'clock. But thank you. This has been a really interesting discussion, and we went to a lot of interesting places that I thought were cool and worth mentioning.
So I'm Juliet. I'm sorry. I mentioned in the sidebar, in the chat bar, writing with color. That there's a Tumblr called Writing with Color, which deals. There's a lot of questions and answers about hair, a lot about African American hair, a lot about black hair, but also about Asian hair and hair colors. So that is a place to go if you're writing.
I will definitely include it in my report.
Look at that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
I got a lot.
I remember when I was living in Japan, people didn't know how to cut my hair. They'd be like, hair is like cat fur. It is so fluffy. Like,
wow. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I'm like, well, can you cut it? And then they're like, I'll give it a shot. So, I mean, if you consider as a hairdresser, the hair is a medium.
Yeah. Well, there is like, you sort of have to be trained to cut different textures of hair, and if you're not, because there are plenty of hairdressers, like, they've never cut a white person's hair, or they've never cut a black person's hair, and they don't know how to do that.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want to do it wrong.
Right. So, I mean, of course, it is hair and it will grow back. So that's kind of
this is why we have to talk about more. But I mean, like, who your hairdresser is so revealing, right? And like, people will stick with their hairdresser because if they have a person who gets their hair right every time, they will go back and back and back and back and back because hair is so close to our hearts and to our identities. that if somebody gets it wrong, even if it looks okay, like from an outside perspective, it's a deep problem. So, you know. Anyway.
I feel a little bad now because my fashion novel, I describe literally only like one person's hair, and it's because she's got like these long blonde braids that like slap the other girl in the face when she spins around. And then that's it. And I'm like, whoa, for fact, because I did try to get in a lot of description of the clothes because this is what the characters notice about each other.
Right.
But they should probably be noticing the hair. But you know, sometimes it's hard to get in the description you want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I have problems with like placement because like I want to just describe stuff all the time. But then it's like there never seems to be a good place to put it. So
yeah. Well, we can talk
kind of
more about that another time. I think at this point I'm going to say done. Maybe we can take it on an after party. Do we have a topic for next week? I can't recall, but I know.
Was there a guest?
Well,
I know there's a guest.
Nisi Shaw is coming in October, but she's going to be here, I think, in the second week. That's usually how I do it. I don't like to have the guests right at the beginning of the month so that people, you know, in case they just noticed at the beginning of the month that we're doing this. I would rather, you know, I would rather not have it the first week of the month. So for the first week, you know what? We'll come up with something. I'm
okay
right now. But I'm going to look back over our discussions, and we've had a lot of suggestions, and I know Morgan has kindly read the list to me before. But what I'll do is I'll just announce it before the hangout. All right? Thank you all for being here. This was cool. And great to have you here, Brian. It's great to see you. I'm stopping broadcast.